The show where there are no penalties, nothing is offside, and everything is fair game. This is The Gloves Are Off.
Welcome to another edition of The Gloves Are Off. I'm Moses Woldu. Thank you for joining us. Of course, we have a lot to talk about, a lot of controversy. And speaking of controversy, that leads me to this man, Greg Buchanan.
Never.
How's it going, my co-host?
Not too bad, Moses, not too bad.
Excellent. And we are pleased to be joined by a man who's dealt with controversy, but not on the wrong side of it, like Greg here. Avery Harrison, of course, you are the new athletic supervisor for Lakeland College. Spent various years within the ACAC, and we're glad to have you here in the Border City.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Now, we exchanged pleasantries, which is all great, but now we're going to get into the real hot topics. And it's been NFL, 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 however, for the wrong reasons. Not what's happening to, say, the Buffalo Bills, which is a great story, or the great win by the Cleveland Browns, just throwing it out there, but I'm talking about more serious issues. Of course, Ray Rice now appealing his suspension for the year, as well as Adrian Peterson and what's happened to him in his recent case. Of course, child abuse is what he's being charged with, or hasn't been charged with officially. There's a lot of legal ramifications that are still ongoing. But in this case, what seems to be the big issue is he was deactivated from the roster prior to their game against New England on Sunday. Now, New England managed to run over Minnesota 30-7. It just so happened the day after Peterson is reinstated. So I'm not saying it's a direct correlation between the two, but how much of an influence did Minnesota's loss, that big loss against New England, perhaps said to the owners, maybe we've got to bring this guy back? Avery?
Well, I think it had to be a factor. You suspend your best player on your team, lose that badly. But you have to look at the big picture and say we did the right thing to begin with and stick to your guns and follow through.
The thing is, through all this, through Rice, through now AP in Minnesota.
Greg Hardy's another one.
Greg Hardy's another one. You know, the stories keep on unfolding, whether it be abuse, whether it be drug charges. Like, what is the NFL's policy on this? And it seems to be no policy at all. It's just a case by case by case situation. And really, the NFL should be stepping up and say, this is what our policy is. This is what happens when you cross the line and you're facing legal issues, and this will happen to you. But the NFL is not stepping up and doing that. And the NFL has to.
But is it the teams or the league that has to step in?
The league has to.
Because here's a good example. Just recently, Radisson Hotels, a local sponsor for the Minnesota Vikings, has now suspended, not necessarily dropped, but suspended their sponsorship with the Vikes. In this case, you're starting to see possibly a major sponsor in Pepsi withdraw. How much of that will be a greater influence to say, you know what, AP, maybe you're not going to be playing, maybe you shouldn't be on the roster? That's got to be huge, right? I think you might see a big turnaround. He's reinstated now, but who says he'll be playing come Sunday, right?
Well, I think too, when you start seeing major corporate sponsors step in like that, I think the league will have to step in and make a policy, which they should have already had in place, I think.
We talked about this last week, you know, the whole Ray Rice thing, where the only time the NFL is going to really step up and make a policy and do some hard decisions is when it comes down to financial. And when the owners aren't happy, the owners aren't making money, and they're losing money, and they're getting money taken out of your pockets from the sponsors, yeah, it won't be very good for the player. That's going to be the end result from that. And AP could be a great football player, but if you're making those kind of decisions off the field, yeah, it's going to not end up well for him.
What do you make of teams getting in there and making the decision? You have Greg Hardy with the Carolina Panthers, who's now suspended after being accused of domestic abuse back in June. You look and has been charged.
He's been charged.
He's been charged. Now that's retroactive, and now they've suspended him. Do you think that's right, considering, of course, with San Francisco, they haven't done anything because McDonald hasn't been charged yet. So do you feel, when you look at the Carolina Panthers, did they make the right move by doing, I guess, Hardy a favor by suspending him in this case, or just themselves?
I think they had to. I think they had to react. You know, the public opinion is a huge influence on the NFL and all major sports, and had they sat back and not made a move, it would look really bad for the organization.
The thing is with Hardy, he's been charged. He hasn't been convicted. when these guys, and the thing is, the court of law will take forever. It's going to be a football season before he probably gets his day in court. So do you, as an organization, wait until his day in court until he's reinstated? No, they let him play, and that's tough.
And with San Francisco, do you feel that they're right? Because he hasn't been charged, so therefore he has a right to be on the team.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Again, it goes back to the NFL has to have a policy. And whether the person's been charged or not charged, but if he's facing any kind of legal matters, the NFL has to step up. Either he's suspended until that legal matters are taken care of, or else. And it can't go from case by case, and it can't go team by team. The NFL has to come up with a league-wide policy for all these situations.
That's a little bit tough because each situation's so different.
But that's the thing.
Adrian's is much different than what you see with Hardy or anybody else, right? Ray Rice.
But you have to have a policy. And if you're going to deal with this case by case situation, you're going to have, if you're a sponsor and it's a case by case situation, whether you're a sponsor for the NFL or individual football teams, you're going to be wondering, well, what is your policy? And they're going to say, well, we don't really have a policy. How can you not have a policy? Seriously.
Well, it comes down to dollars and cents, like you said.
Yeah.
Well, we'll quickly go into matters that have been exciting. Of course, the Buffalo Bills we mentioned earlier, 2-0, great surprises. The renovations to Ralph Wilson Stadium. It actually looks like a place that you're not in Buffalo. Could you imagine that?
No.
If you could be in a stadium that makes you feel like you're not in that town, that's something special. And they did some great renovations to it. The parking lot, in terms of tailgating, sold out days before the game. And you're starting to see the passion again for Bills fans. And the product's looking good in the field. They're one of a few teams that are 2-0 right now. Now, out of those 2-0 teams, you have Buffalo, Cincinnati, Houston, Denver, Carolina, Arizona, and Philadelphia with their big come-from-behind victory last night against Indy. Out of those teams, which 2-0 team is not likely to make the playoffs?
Buffalo.
Really? You're going to go against the Cinderella story?
I am.
Oh,
yeah.
come on. What's wrong with you, Avery?
Well, they had some fortunate plays that were big for them, and they won. But I think in the course of the whole season, I think that that luster quickly wears off and reality sets in, and they're not as good as 2-0 might indicate right now.
I say Cincinnati is the fallout boy. What do you say?
For me, it's either Buffalo or Philadelphia. I thought Philadelphia got a little lucky last night. Luck doesn't throw that pass. They kick a field goal, game's over. I think Philadelphia is a football club that, they're right against certain opponents, but I think more than anything, when they start getting against tougher opponents, you're gonna see the real Philadelphia Eagles.
All I have to say is they're in one of the worst divisions in football. I think Philly's got, you could win it at 8-8, let's be honest. So I don't think Philadelphia is one of those teams. But I do want to ask you this. Now, we talked about the 2-0 teams not likely to make the playoffs. What about those 0-2 teams? That includes the New Orleans Saints. You have the Oakland Raiders. Well, I don't know why I threw them in there. We know what's going to happen to Oakland, Kansas City, the New York Giants, Tampa Bay, and, of course, Indianapolis, who Philadelphia beat last night. Out of those teams, who makes the playoffs from an 0-2 start?
I say the Saints. I'm a Drew Brees kind of guy, and I think he's had a couple of tough goes in the first two games, but he is a true leader, both on and off, and I think he's going to carry that team.
I think Indianapolis. They shouldn't have lost last night. A couple of bad decisions, and all of a sudden, game's over.
It's amazing what the one or two key decisions can do for you. Ask the New York Jets when they call a timeout and they end up scoring and lose because of that timeout. Well, speaking of timeouts, we're going to take a timeout here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the situation happening with the Washington Redskins at the quarterback position. Stay tuned.